Hello, and thank you for having me. My talk is called Building Accessible Angular Apps, and today I'm going to talk about chances and challenges. I've received a wonderful introduction, and there are just a couple of things to add. I've been giving workshops on Angular and accessibility since 2022, and last year I decided that this is not enough. I started to write a book, so I even finished it, and it can be pre-ordered, but it's in German. So if you're still interested, go for it. If not, well, that's it. But nevertheless, if you have any questions after my talk, anything that comes to your mind, don't hesitate to ping me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or Blue Sky, or via email. You have my contact details on the slide. So I'm really looking forward to your questions. With this, we're ready to start, and I'm going to start with the elephant in the room, namely European Accessibility Act. It is introduced now. It comes in force on the 28th of June 2025, this year, in a couple of months, meaning that all European countries have to introduce a law or introduced a law for the public sector enforcing accessibility of e-commerce websites. Those rectangles on the slide that you see represent every single EU country, so it might influence you if you are based in the EU. The European Accessibility Act references the European norm 301 and 549, and this norm references itself WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, in the version 2.1. The current recommendation for this international standard is 2.2, and it is said that the European norm will be updated soon, maybe this or next year. So probably it's worth it to look up the next version, WCAG 2.2. A brief introduction to that, just before we dive deeply into Angular. WCAG 2.1 and 2.2 both are structured as follows. They have 4 principles: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. That's how the web content should be. And all these principles are split into or organized in guidelines. And to these guidelines also have success criteria. These criteria are grouped by conformity levels. It's A, AA, and AAA, depending on the number of users that benefit from these requirements and the complexity or how hard it is to learn or implement those requirements. So the most legislations aim for A and AA levels, leaving out AAA. With this being said, let's have a look at Angular. When we have a look at the same picture, I just highlighted the areas where you might face some challenges or have some chances with Angular and some tools out of the box that we have with this wonderful framework. And now I'm going to go through through these requirements one by one and present you some code, some solutions, or some potential challenges. Starting with 2.4.2 page title. That's the lowest hanging fruit. Whenever you configure your routes, just add a title to every single view you have, and then you already comply with WCAG. If you have some complex dynamic titles, for example, on your details page, it might be worth implementing the title strategy. In this case, you can extend the existing service provided by Angular and implement your own update title method. In this, you set the title and you can start with a unique title for your page whenever you get it from backend, from any other business logic that you have in your application. Doesn't matter. You start with a unique one, and then you can, if you wish, add the app name to indicate that this particular page, I show the quote marks because it's a single page application. I'd say a view. So this particular view belongs to a set of pages of views, which are your website. So it is as easy as it gets. Next point, 2.4.8 location. It is a AAA requirement. However, it's very easy to meet. First of all, you probably already heard about router link active. This is a directive which comes from the router package, and you probably already know how to use it. You provide the name of a class, for example, active, and then you style it in your CSS. Whenever the item in your navigation area, whenever you navigate to this area, this item, which corresponds to the active route, will get this class, and then you can style it. A simple example in the application, in the demo application that I have here, I have a navigation with new book, books, and about accessible reads items. And whenever I navigate, if you can see it on the right, I have my class active link, which is a class name. On the slide, I have active. Doesn't matter. You can choose your own name. So that's the first point. Imagine you have the route books, and new book is also /books and then new book. In this case, you'll have two routes which start the same way, and it might be that the router link active will get both of them, indicating two navigation items as active at the same time, time or point. That's not what we want. To prevent this, you can specify how you want the router to match it with the configuration router link active options and exact equals true, or provided as true. In this case, only the exact matches will be highlighted. So let's have a look one more time at our implementation. It looks good, but that's it. The problem is that this indication is just a visual one. If a user is blind and uses a screen reader, they might not get this information. So we need to add some little extra to tell the screen readers that this is the current link or current navigation item. Router has us covered too, and here we have ARIA current when active, which we provide with the value page, and the rest is history. The rest is that Angular takes care of for us. But you might ask yourself, what is ARIA current? Well, ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications, and this is a set of attributes that you can add to your semantic HTML whenever it's missing some information. So this tool is so important. ARIA, all these attributes are so important and so mighty and so powerful that if you go to the webpage of the group that develops ARIA specification, they say no ARIA is better than bad ARIA. Because with this huge power comes huge responsibility. You can override all the semantics of HTML if you do it wrong. In my mind, I have the following picture. Imagine some hills that would be the HTML. You use, I hope you use the semantic HTML, for example, buttons for buttons, links for links, p-text for text, etc. But sometimes they're missing some information. And in this case, you can put some attributes, for example, ARIA current in our case, to add some extra things that HTML just doesn't have. In some rare cases, you want to exclude some HTML information and hide it from the screen readers. For example, ASCII art. ASCII art means a collection of some, I don't know, semicolons and parentheses, etc., forming some picture, which screen readers usually cannot recognize. So you can use ARIA to hide it and replace by some accessible variant for screen readers. Altogether, combined, ARIA and HTML form the final result, which is a less bumpy road. So the hills of HTML can be removed, and some gaps between can be filled in so that the road to the accessible website is less bumpy. So coming to this implementation, again, let's have a look at our navigation. At the moment, accessible reads navigation item is activated, and as you can see, my element has ARIA current with the value page on it. If I navigate to the books, ARIA current is removed from the previous item and placed on the current active item on the books. And with that, we made our navigation accessible for screen readers as well. Now they know where they are. Coming to the next point. Some navigations which consist multiple links can be tedious. Imagine tabbing through all of them. For this, there is another WCAG success criteria, 2.4.1 bypass blocks. In this case, we can offer skip links. Skip links are there on multiple web pages. Just an example of Starbucks, if I navigate via keyboard, the first thing that plops in is skip to main content. So how can I implement it? The naive way would be just to take the href, put the anchor in it, and put an ID on the main tag. The second part to this magic is the CSS rule. In this case, I apply some set of rules. I make my element very small with the width of 1 pixel, height of 1 pixel. I hide everything which overflows. I position it absolute to remove it from the flow. I use white space, no wrap, to prevent the screen readers of spelling the text one by one, because it's really narrow and sometimes it's broken letter by letter. So that's the prevention for the wrong announcement. And then I inset all the contents inside, making sure that's really very small and invisible, almost invisible. So, and I apply this shrink logic only when my element has no focus, is not active as a link, or no element within it is focused, because it's not visible. And we should not hide interactive elements from the screen, because how would we otherwise know what we're clicking on? So that's the second part of the implementation. However, with Angular, there is a problem with that. It's a single page application, and probably you would have a header and the main component in your app component. It is not a routed component, so it doesn't know about the current URL. And it will then navigate to the base URL. So meaning we're navigating away from our view. That's not what we want. And more than that, we're using href, and not the router link, so that Angular doesn't even know that this is an internal navigation and will try to navigate externally, reloading the whole page. And that's not the sense of a single page application. So unfortunately, this naive approach won't work. Instead, you have to get your URL yourself. That's quite easy. You inject the router and you subscribe to the events upon the navigation, and you assemble your URL yourself and append the anchor tag at the end. Using href, you can then provide the proper link, or router link, actually. Next point, focus order, 2.4.3. In this case, I would like to briefly talk about autofocus. First of all, be really careful with that, because the requirement says you should only use autofocus if all users would like this input field to be focused. The usual valid cases are the start page, the homepage of Google search, Wikipedia search, or sometimes also some login pages, because usually you navigate to the login page because you want to log in. If you have a valid case for that, be careful that autofocus is evaluated on the document load. And with a single page application, it happens just once. So whenever the user enters the your web page, your single page application for the first time, autofocus will work. If they navigate away, navigate back, autofocus won't be evaluated the second time because the document has already been loaded. In this case, you have to grab the reference to your element, to your input field yourself, and focus it yourself. Speaking of forms and input fields, let's move on to forms. We have 3.3.1 and 3.3.3, error identification and error suggestion. First of all, we have a nice feature out of the box with ng-submit. You can have, if you have a submit button in your form, instead of a click event, you can remove it and you can put ng-submit on the form tag, which gives you a nice keyboard functionality whenever the user is on the form, not even on the button, on the form, and hits enter, the form will be submitted. But be careful because ng-submit might not wait till the end of the asynchronous validation in your form. Next point, error identification. Whenever the error happens, we have to identify it and provide some information about it. For example, an error message. It is a part of UX. It's not really a requirement from WCAG that we highlight the errors whenever the user interacted with the form. Imagine you enter the new view with the form and all the fields are already red and contain the errors, though you haven't even tried yet to enter some data. With this, you have, as you already know, the dirty state, or also touched, as you wish. If you try to implement this with native means, that's really tedious. You need JavaScript for that. You cannot implement this with CSS only. So it's a nice feature of Angular. We check for the interaction with the input field, and once we have it, then we display some error message. For example, please provide your name. Well, now the next problem. Our input field is not connected with this text. And imagine you navigate via keyboard. The p tag is just a text. It is not keyboard focusable, so it won't be announced out of the blue to our screen readers whenever the error happens. So what we can do, we can combine the input field and this error message. How to do so? We need an ID on the p tag on our error message, and then we use ARIA described by and reference this ID in our input. So it should be here name label. I'm sorry for the typo. It should be the ID of the p tag. What is this about? What is this ARIA described by about? Here I have to talk about the accessible name and description computation. This is a specification which identifies how the name of an element is calculated. What is this accessible name? It's the name or the piece of information that is announced by the assistive technologies. For example, I have a tag with the contents home. The screen readers will announce link home because they have this contents as accessible name. Sometimes it's not as easy because we don't have the contents there. For example, in the case of an icon button, let's imagine we have an image inside of a button and no text. One of the options would be to provide alt attribute, to provide the text in the alt attribute, the text alternative for the image, and then it will serve as the accessible name for our button. That's what screen readers will then announce. Another way, which also might be familiar for you, is ARIA label. But again, you have to be careful with that. ARIA is very powerful. So you can also, instead of providing the text alternative, use ARIA label click me, and then the screen reader will announce button click me. And then the next case, I put everything on this link. I have a link which has the contents name 4. I have a title name 3. I have ARIA label name 2, and I have ARIA labeled by, which is name 1. What do you think? And this name 1 is a reference to a p tag place order. So what do you think the screen readers will announce? I will count to 3 and then announce the solution so that you can first think by yourself. The winner is place order. Some answers that I often hear when I pose this question is that the screen reader might announce everything, which is not true because the accessible name and description computation specification specifies what is the precedence order of all the name giving options. And if we have several of them, ARIA labeled by always wins. It overrides everything else. Imagine we didn't have it, then ARIA label is the second most powerful. Then it would be name 2. And only if we don't have those, then the contents will proceed, and then we will get name 4. Title will then give us the description. So coming back to the example with the form, ARIA described by gives us not the name is still the values of the input field, but the description, which is announced additionally. And in this case, if we have this text, then it will be announced additionally whenever the users enter or focus input field, meaning that they will know if there is an error, what is the error. Next one. 4.1.2, name role value. In this case, we've already briefly talked about the accessible names for links. Imagine you have a for loop and you generate several links for your every single list item. If you don't do anything specifically, then you will end up with, I don't know, 10 or 20 or really many read more links, which are all the same. In the worst case, they are all read more, meaning not helpful. In the second worst case, they are still the same, but lead to different destinations. So our users still won't know where they will land if they click on links. So the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit here is just to add a span and provided with the class, for example, screen reader only or visually hidden, and put some extra information with unique data in there. For example, in our case, so if we have a title, we can add something like "read more about" and the item title. This screen reader only class is actually the same that I've already showed you before for the skip link. So the idea is that we make the contents really small, but we keep them in the render tree. Why? Because if we exclude it from the rendering tree, then they are excluded from the information that the assistive technologies get, and then this information won't be announced. So if you ask yourself, why not use at if false, meaning it's always excluded? Well, we have to this is the answer, because otherwise the assistive technologies won't have this information. With that, I'd like to go a bit deeper and provide a whole overview. So we have the first category of the information. It should be visible and should be available for the assistive technology. And actually, that's the majority of cases that you should aim for. In case something should not be visible but should be available for assistive technologies, you can use screen reader only classes or visually hidden. That's the convention name for them. You can also use a mix-in provided by Angular Material CDK, or you can implement your own. On the other hand, if you have something which is visible but should not be available for assistive technologies, then you can use ARIA hidden. An example would be ASCII art, I already described this, or if you have some decorative SVGs, because there is no alt attribute for SVGs, and if you want to hide them, you can use ARIA hidden. For pictures, by the way, just use an empty alt attribute. The last one. If you don't want anything to be visible, neither visible nor accessible for assistive technologies, well, then you can use at if, or display none, or visibility hidden. Next point, 1.3.1, info and relationships. And in here, we have the example which Sam and Yunus from the community brought up, and kudos for them to talking about this. Imagine you have a list, an ordered or unordered list, and you have a for loop with list items in there. We have a very handy at empty utility there if your list is empty. The question is, though, what would you put there? The problem here is you cannot go with the div because as per the specification of HTML, the div wouldn't be rendered. But you cannot actually take a list item to say there is no list items. It's not logical, it's not semantic. So in this case, the solution would be just to go with an else, at else, instead of at empty. Continuing with that, there is another out-of-the-box solution from thing from utility from Angular, which I really like, which is the built-in uppercase pipe. However, you shouldn't use it because DONOTUSE, etc., as you can guess, the screen readers might spell the text that you put in the uppercase pipe. Instead of this, you better use CSS on text transform uppercase rule, because in this case, your text will stay normal in the DOM and in the rendering tree and will submit it like this to the assistive technologies, and only the display will be changed. So with this, you have actually the choice how to implement how to make your Angular applications accessible. And the choice is in the way you think about it. Either you think about it as a chance or a challenge. I navigate back to the overview so that you can have a look yourself again at the specific areas of Angular. As you can see, there are quite a few of them. They might have some chances, they might have some challenges. My point is, though, you see the rest, and the rest still has to be accessible. In this case, I really hope that whenever you take it as a chance, and it will lead to a positive change to a more accessible Angular applications. With this, I thank you for your attention, and I am ready for your questions.
Thank you for this lovely talk. It was amazing to hear about all this stuff. And I think the same stands true for our audience, because we have a lot of questions. So I'm going to the questions right now. Are there some recommendations, best practices, alternatives to avoid something like document.getElementBy, etc.?
Something like what? I didn't get it acoustically.
I will ask the questions once again. Are there some recommendations, best practices, alternatives to avoid something like document.getElementBy?
Okay. Well, of course, you can use the Angular way of referencing your elements by view element, etc. So you don't have to go to document and get element by ID, etc. You have normal Angular way for that.
Perfect. Thank you. And then another person asks, would opacity 0 work with the bypass blocks?
So let me, I have a suggestion. I will just end the screen sharing, and maybe if I see
yes,
the questions, then it's easier. So opacity 0. Oh, perfect question. Thank you for it. Opacity 0 makes your elements invisible. They stay in the rendering tree, and they will be announced by the screen readers. They take up all the space they used to take up before. The only problem is that you have to make sure that whenever this element is focused, for example, if you put opacity 0 to a link, then once it is focused, it loses this. It is normally colored and it's visible. Usually, opacity 0 is used for checkboxes as a means to provide accessible, nicely looking alternatives. Because what you do, you put a opacity 0 to your boxes, and then you put some nicely looking checkboxes underneath, so that the users interact with your native all accessible checkboxes, but they look just like your fancy, nice things. That's one of the approaches for opacity 0.
Perfect, thank you. And we have a few more questions. Will user invalid help with showing errors only after using interacted with the form?
Yes, it will, and I'm really looking forward to it, because as far as I know, it's not well supported yet, but that's the way to go. Because the last time I tried to implement it by myself without Angular, I missed it so much.
Yeah, I can feel that. So our title attributes really bad for accessibility. It is quite an easy way to add tooltips to trimmed content, but there are some claims that they are not accessible for keyboard users.
A very good question. Thank you for that. With titles, they are, if you put a title on an element, then you will have a nice tooltip on that. However, this tooltip is available just for the mouse users, because it appears when you hover over an element, which means you can use it, but you cannot put some relevant information in that, which should be available for keyboard or mobile app users or mobile users. Otherwise, you would exclude them. Meaning, those tooltips, what you can use them for is just the information duplication. If you have something which is available on in some other place, you would repeat it with the title, which means it's a bit obsolete to there's a bit of duplication of information. One valid case where you can use it is just on the icons. Sometimes it's hard to guess what's the meaning, then you put it on that, but that's just an edge case. Usually you should not use title to convey some, to provide some information, because you would exclude some people.
Perfect, thank you. That was very interesting. And let's move on to our next question. Will your new book also be available in other languages in the future?
I hope so. And I plan to write a book on Angular accessibility specifically, because the book is more general accessibility, and I really hope to write one on Angular. And then in English, promised.
Yes, I think that would be a little bit better for all of us that don't speak German. So how should the accessibility be taken care of for treatable?
Oh, it's a difficult topic. Well, in general, I would just research it. I try to go for the ARIA page. They usually post some nice user interaction patterns and provide some code for that, just to get an idea how to implement it and what to take care of, for example, keyboard accessibility, etc. I'm not sure if they have this particular pattern. Just double check it, please. In this case, I would, of course, think about the usual suspects. As I mentioned, keyboard accessibility should be there, color contrast should be there. What else? It should be all the accessible names are there. However, for the interactive elements. So there's no single bullet what I would say, just do it like this. In this case, I'm afraid just have a look at it. If you're using Angular material, you can have a look at their components, and then I advise to go to the GitHub and have a look at the issues, because they are also nicely tagged, so that you will know if there are some things that to consider, if there are some open issues to look for. So that would be my approach for this.
Yes, I think you covered it really nicely. Another person is asking how to check if my website is accessible or get a score.
Well, if you want to get a score, you might start with the Lighthouse, because Lighthouse is already in your Chrome browser, and it will give you a score. However, Lighthouse is based on the user impact assessment of DQ. DQ is the company behind Xcore and some tools that are based on it. What I want to say by that, don't stop by Lighthouse, go further and install other browser extensions. For example, as I mentioned, XDev Core, DevTools, or Wave, or ARC Accessibility Checker, or IBM Accessibility Insights, or Silktide, or what else? Yeah, there are a lot. So I just named a few. It's not even a recommendation. It's just that those came from the top of my head. If you do your research, you will find a lot of them. And my recommendation is to try them all out, because they find different bugs. They have different mentality how to go around the bugs. Some of them say, I just I give you the problems where I'm sure they are problems their strategies to minimize false positives. Some other extensions say, I give you everything and you will decide whether it's an accessibility issue or not. So try all of them or several of them, have a look if they are a good fit for your website, and then we'll have a first step on that. But I have to warn you, it's not possible to have 100% automatic check on accessibility. I'm not sure if it's going to be possible in the nearest future. There are some things that you have to assess yourself. For example, the meaningful tab sequence, keyboard accessibility in general. So you still have to check manually as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this. And we will go through two more questions. We have a lot more, but I don't think there is enough time. So a person asked us, if I already have too many components, is there a method to implement this accessibility support?
I'm not sure what you mean by this accessibility support. The things that I mentioned, for example, ARIA router active with router link active and ARIA current when active is applied just to the navigation, so it doesn't apply to all the components. The same goes for the for loops. Whenever you have for loops, then you have to mind this as additional names for your links, or if you have an empty list. So it's just case by case. It's not about the amount of components. You have to look at what components are really, what is relevant for them.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, would you say that reading up on how to set up the page is enough, or would you say that accessing the page ourselves with a screen reading tool is required?
Well, the official opinion is that it's always better to test with a screen reader, because that's the final truth. Either you hear it or you don't. However, I'm fully aware that's not very practical to do this every single time. And with this, what you can do, you can check your browser tools for accessible name. If I can briefly share my screen one more time, I can briefly show you where to find it. I go to my books and I am, let me know if you see my screen.
Yes, perfect.
So I go to the elements, and there, where you usually have styles or computed, you might already know this, 2 tabs. If you tap further or you have it under those errors, you find accessibility. And in there, you have computed properties. And here you see the names. Remember what I said about accessible names and descriptions? That's where it's going to be displayed. And I click here on my link, new book, and as you can see, the name is there. So I know the screen reader has all the necessary information to announce this link properly. So that would be my second best way to test for accessibility, by checking if the accessible names are there. And if the roles are correct, it's a link, it's true, and it's focusable, so I'm good. From the information the screen reader gets, I assume it should announce it properly. So I won't check it one more time. That's the way I would go around it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this. And thank you so much for doing the whole talk. It was really nice having you here. We all learned a lot of stuff. And if there are any more questions, as you said in the beginning, maybe people can find you on social media.
Sure. I'm looking forward to your questions. Just ping me.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.